120 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Transport, Infrastructure and Communities, pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee. On Tuesday, April 18th, 2024, the committee is resuming its study of Competition Act and air travel in northern, rural, and remote communities. Before we begin, I'd like to remind all members and meeting participants in the room of the following important preventative measures. To prevent disruptive and potentially harmful audio feedback incidents that can cause injuries, all in-person participants are reminded to keep their earpieces away from the microphones at all times. As indicated in the communique from the Speaker to all members on Monday, April 29th, the following measures have been taken to help prevent audio feedback incidents. All earpieces have been replaced by a model which greatly reduces the probability of audio feedback. These new earpieces are black in color, whereas the former earpieces were gray. Please only use the black approved earpiece. By default, all unused earpieces will be unplugged at the start of the meeting. When you're not using your earpiece, please place it face down on the middle of the sticker for this purpose that you will find on the table as indicated. Please consult the cards on the table for guidelines to prevent audio feedback incidents. The room layout has also been adjusted to increase the distance between microphones and reduce the chance of feedback from an ambient earpiece. These measures are in place so that we can conduct our business without interruption and to protect the health and safety of all participants, including our interpreters. Thank you all for your cooperation. I'd now like to welcome our witnesses, colleagues. Appearing from 11 to noon today, we have from the Air Transport Association of Canada, Mr. John McKenna, President and Chief Executive Officer. Welcome to you, sir. From the National Airlines Council of Canada, Jeff Morrison, President and Chief Executive Officer. Welcome back. And of course, from North Star Air, we have Mr. Jeff Stout, President and Chief Executive Officer. Welcome to you. We'll turn it right over to you, Mr. McKenna, for your opening remarks. And for that, I will heed you this. I'll give you the floor. You have 5 minutes, sir.
Good morning, bonjour. This year, the Air Transport Association of Canada is celebrating 90 years of representing this country's commercial air transport industry. Our 175 members are engaged at all levels of commercial aviation and flight training in every region of Canada. Our membership ranges from very large domestic, transporter, international carriers, regional carriers, flight training organizations, and the Canadian air transport support industry. Nos membres offrent des services dans toutes les régions du pays, y compris les communautés nord.
Our members provide services in all areas of the country, including remote communities.
Services in Canada is affected by many factors, a significant portion of which are fees and charges added directly to the price of tickets or indirectly through fuel excise taxes, carbon taxes, airport taxes, regulatory costs, outrageous APPR compensations and charges, and non-subsidized services. Le cumul de ces coûts fait qu'il est impossible pour les transporteurs.
These cumulative costs make it impossible for airlines to offer competitive services in Canada compared to other markets or other modes of transportation. It is fair, however, to say that the Canadian air travelers have more options today in travel decisions as they are no longer limited to one or two airlines.
Today's consumers can travel with Porter Airlines or other large carriers to most major markets and cities in Canada. Greater travel options put a downward pressure on prices. The government needs to embrace even greater competition by limiting the huge barriers to entry to our market, as well as those limiting return on investment. The northern and remote regions of Canada are geographically large and face a different reality. The user pay model is not and cannot be applicable to those markets, and the concentration of services is sometimes the only way that service can be guaranteed, given the sparsely populated huge territory. The merger of First Air and Canadian North is a prime example of consolidation of air-operated resources needed to maintain service to small and very remote communities who depend on air service as a lifeline. That merger was key to their combined ability to provide the service needed to airports, which are a vital socioeconomic link to the rest of Canada, many of which are also important feeders of international passengers to and from major airport hubs in Canada. Interline agreements are an option, but the government should perhaps go a step farther in that many airlines linking the major Canadian hubs to the larger northern markets, such as Yellowknife and Whitehorse, should be strongly encouraged to also service the less lucrative, smaller northern outlying markets, perhaps through interline agreements. La concurrence de l'industrie du transport aérien fait également sentir dans la
competition in the air transport industry can also be felt in a critical labor shortage in Canada for pilots and aircraft maintenance engineers, the AMEs. Demand for experienced pilots and MAEs is draining regional airlines of their resources.
Pilots and AMEs is draining regional airlines of of their resources. The larger airlines in Canada are hiring more pilots and AMEs than this country produces any given year, so they hire away from the regional carriers. Faced with an imminent labor drain, the regional carriers have a choice between lowering frequency of service or cutting out routes altogether. Therefore, ATAC considers that the following basic but necessary first steps are key to Canada's aviation sector's competitiveness. The government needs to reinvest at least the majority, if not all, of the aviation-generated revenues back into aviation infrastructure. This is essential to maintaining our industry. We don't stand a chance of being competitive as long as the government continues to see aviation as no more than a cash cow. L'aviation régionale constitue un maillon essentiel de la connectivité au Canada et les investissements.
Regional aviation is a vital link in Canada's connectivity, and government investment in regional and northern air infrastructure is long overdue. The government must recognize that the user pay model cannot possibly work in northern, rural, and remote communities, as that model just can't sustain operations in these regions that depend almost entirely on aviation.
Federally backed funding program for qualified Canadian students attending professional flight schools or post-secondary institutions providing Transport Canada approved aircraft maintenance engineer programs. This would help attract the vast number of pilots and maintenance personnel so desperately needed to address critical shortages that are seriously impacting service to Canadians. Je vous remercie. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. McKenna. Next, we'll go to Mr. Morrison. Mr. Morrison, the floor is yours. You have 5 minutes, sir.
Mais merci, Monsieur le Président, pour l'invitation d'être.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for inviting us to be here.
Once again, to appear before this committee to discuss air travel in relation to rural, northern, and remote communities. First, let me acknowledge we are on the traditional territories of the Algonquin and Anishinaabes peoples. Canada's airlines are committed to providing service to communities large and small throughout the country. Although air travel is an undisputable force for good for all Canadians, it has particular relevance for people living in rural, remote, and northern areas, given its vital link in the supply chains, its relevance for tourism, and air travel, of course, is often the only viable link to the outside world. NAC member airlines provide service to all provinces and operate to over 50 airports in Canada outside of the Tier 1 or the top 8 largest airports. And many of Canada's 24 domestic carriers also provide specialized regional service, and I believe Mr. Stout will likely speak more to that. As I said when I was here a few weeks ago, NAC's vision of a competitive air travel system is one in which all carriers, large and small, have the same opportunity to succeed. Having said that, I'll reiterate a couple of the key challenges to competitiveness that I spoke of before this committee and what you've heard from other witnesses, including Mr. McKenna, in the context of rural, remote, and northern service. You've heard repeatedly about the negative impacts that the high cost of third-party fees and charges inherent in Canada's user pay system has on the competitiveness of Canada's air travel system, a fact that is exacerbated when seen through the lens of rural, remote, and northern regions. With lower populations and lower margins, providing comprehensive and affordable service to regional and remote communities is an ongoing challenge. But as our northern carrier colleagues expressed to you last week, this is compounded by such high user charges as airport rents, air navigation fees, fuel excise charges, the 33% increase in the air service charge implemented last month, and so forth. And by the way, this is not just the opinion of Canada's airlines. Our American counterpart, Airlines for America, have informed this committee that since 2019, there has been a 38% reduction in American carriers flying to Tier 2 or smaller airports in Canada, with the high cost burden cited as the top reason. Just anecdotally, I just got back yesterday from the IATA annual general meeting in Dubai, and anecdotally I can share with you that Canada's reputation as a high-cost jurisdiction is something I heard more than once. Airport infrastructure is another challenge disproportionately impacting rural, remote, and northern communities. For example, aircraft may not be able to land at smaller airports in the case of inclement weather because they may not have the required lighting requirements, which compounds potential disruptions. We heard at the recent Accessibility Summit that meeting the needs of passengers with accessibility challenges can be more challenging at smaller airports due to inability to upgrade infrastructure. And you heard last week about the challenges northern airports face in meeting infrastructure and safety requirements within the confines of a strict user pay system. And as we've said before this committee, can it really be considered user pay when the federal government takes out over $400 million per year more in airport rents than it reinvests back into the system? And third, many stakeholders, including many non-airline entities, have been clear that if the APPR regulations as proposed by the CTA in July of 2023 are implemented, they would have a negative impact on regional and remote connectivity. Canada's Atlantic premiers, rural airports, unions, smaller municipalities, including communities from my home region of Northern Ontario, as represented by the Northern Ontario Large Urban Mayors Caucus, have publicly expressed these concerns. And many of these concerns over regional connectivity have mostly been in response to the proposed regulations released in July 23. They don't even yet focus on the cost recovery component of the APPR reform, which will drive costs even higher and put regional connectivity at even greater risk. These concerns were well captured by the Atlantic Canada Airports Association, who said, and I quote, "Increased regulatory demands, including penalties, cost recovery mechanisms, and other penalties will burden airlines with higher operational costs, potentially translating to escalated ticket prices for air travelers and reduced regional connectivity." So, Mr. Chair, since I last appeared before this committee just a few weeks ago, the Competition Bureau of Canada has launched a consultation on the terms of reference for an upcoming market study that it will undertake into air travel. We will propose that the Competition Bureau focus its study on the competitiveness of the overall air travel system and look at how we can better balance the user pay principle so that the negative impacts of Canada's current approach, particularly those impacts disproportionately impacting rural and remote communities, can be best addressed. So merci encore, Monsieur le Président. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I look forward to the conversation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Morrison, and thank you for being here. I know that you just come off of an overnight flight from Dubai, and we appreciate your presence. Next, we'll go to Mr. Stute or Mr. Stout. I apologize if I've gotten that wrong, but I'm sure you'll clarify in your opening remarks. The floor is yours, sir. You have 5 minutes.
Very much. Hello, thank you for inviting me here today. My name is Jeff Stout, and I'm the President and Chief Operating Officer of North Star Air. This is my first time engaging with parliamentarians, and it's a distinct honor to be here today. Ottawa often seems so far away from home in Thunder Bay and from the communities we work with on a daily basis, so I'm excited to be here and share some of our insights about the North with you. North Star Air is a unique airline to me. It's special because my father started it as a family business over 25 years ago. As a family, we've worked hard to grow this airline and ensure we could continue to serve northern communities. In 2013, when it became abundantly clear that my dream of becoming an NHL goalie was not going to happen, I joined the company as a ramp hand, loading airplanes in Pickle Lake, the northernmost road-accessible community in Ontario. Over the last 11 years, we've grown from a team of 40 to over 320 strong and have tripled our fleet size to 21 aircraft today. As part of this journey, we finalized a deal in 2017 with the Northwest Company, who now wholly owns us. Our success story can be attributed to our community-minded approach. Our growth introduced competition into our markets and let community members vote with their dollars. Today, we are proud to have revenue sharing agreements and partnerships with 12 First Nations. We offer passenger service to 14 communities in Northern Ontario and compete with other regional airlines on over half of those routes. We also compete with other carriers for chartered passenger aircraft services. The rest of our services are dedicated to cargo and bulk fuel deliveries. We provide freight service to bring fresh produce and essential retail goods to over 50 communities in Northern Ontario, Northern Manitoba, and Nunavut. This is why the Northwest Company acquired us, to fill in critical logistics gaps, although it is important to note that we operate separately and distinctly from the Northwest Company's stores. Our freight business services all retailers, including community stores. We have competition from other providers on the majority of our routes, despite the small market size. Operating in the North comes with substantial challenges, and I believe parliamentarians and government can help northern communities address them. Approximately 10% of our flights are canceled before we even depart because of infrastructure deficiencies in the North, including lack of precision approaches, the scarcity of de-icing equipment, and lack of precise weather reporting. This means our flights cannot land in bad weather conditions, which you can imagine are quite frequent in the North. Most northern airport authorities do not provide de-icing services, and storage space is limited or unavailable, which is a safety risk that seriously impacts our operations. High cancellation rates mean we must be careful about our levels of aircraft utilization. I believe this committee has heard quite a bit about the impacts of the flight and duty time regulations. Those have required us to hire 13% more pilots to maintain the same level of aircraft utilization pre-regulation. Other airlines are taking similar steps, thus creating a domino effect within the industry where more pilots are required to complete the same number of flights. This market dynamic has subsequently resulted in increased price of operations. Over the last 3 years, we have seen pilot costs alone increase by over 30%. While we provide bursaries to community members interested in becoming pilots, we believe the government can do more to incentivize others to enter the profession. My family grew this business out of a love for the North, and that guides how we operate today. We try to give back through these bursaries. We've launched a recycling program to help communities with their waste management. We have the Community Partnerships Funds, which have resulted in tangible infrastructure and economic growth in the communities we partner with. We are fully committed to the North. Our commitment means it is critical for us to control costs and ensure flights land safely and on time. We are an essential lifeline for the communities we serve and want to be an enabler in social and economic prosperity in the North. This means making sure we can help people reach doctor's appointments, travel for educational opportunities, and access fresh and healthy produce. I recognize the committee members may have questions about our unique operating environment or the challenges we face. I look forward to answering your questions and appreciate your collective interest in supporting the North. Thank you again for this opportunity to share our story with you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Stout, and I would like to thank you as well for being here and for lending your expertise and your guidance to us today. We'll begin our line of questioning today with Dr. Lewis. Dr. Lewis, the floor is yours. You have 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank the witnesses for coming today and for their testimony. I would like to take the opportunity at this moment, Mr. Chair, to move a motion on a very urgent matter. I tabled this motion last week, and it has been distributed to all the members of the committee in both official languages. I move as follows. Given that a Sustainable Development Technologies Canada, a $1 billion taxpayer fund, is under investigation by the Auditor General and the Conflict of Interest Ethics Commissioner. B, a former director of the fund, Andre Lise Method, helped to send multiple companies in which she has a financial interest millions of dollars, and despite this, the government appointed her as a director to the Canada Infrastructure Bank. Pursuant to Standing Order 1081A, the committee order the Canada Infrastructure Bank to provide the committee within 7 days of the adoption of this motion, A, the resignation letter of Andre Lise Method, B, a comprehensive and detailed summary of the projects and funds that she oversaw during her time on the CIB board, C, any internal communications regarding or relating to her resignation from the board, and pursuant to Standing Order 1082, the committee called for the following witnesses to testify before the committee for no less than 2 hours each. A, and Andre Lise Method, founder and managing partner of Cycle Capital. B, Jane Huntley, PCO Director of Appointments. C, Dominic LeBlanc, Minister of Public Safety, Democratic Institutions and Intergovernmental Affairs. And D, Aaron Corey, CEO of the Canada Infrastructure Bank. Mr. Chair, I'd like to take a few moments to remark on this motion. Sadly, it is no surprise that we see yet another instance of mismanagement and waste from this Liberal government. The Auditor General's report released earlier this week is truly shocking. She assessed the extent to which there were ethical violations and mismanagement at the SDTC, the Sustainable Development Technology Canada, what we call the government's Green Slush Fund. In her report, it was found that the SDTC violated its, and I quote, conflict of interest policies 90 times, awarded $59 million to 10 projects that were not eligible, and frequently overstated the environmental benefits of its projects, end quote. This is indeed shocking evidence of gross mismanagement by this fund and by this government. It is incumbent upon this committee to get to the bottom of this for Canadians. It is also essential that we find out how the board of directors at the Green Slush Fund, who has admitted to several of these 90 conflicts of interest involving millions of taxpayer dollars, how she ended up being appointed to the Liberal Canada Infrastructure Bank. It is completely unacceptable that those who repeatedly violate conflict of interest policies should be promoted to plumb government positions because of their connections as Liberal insiders. The motion that I have put forward is a necessary step to ensure accountability of this government. Canadians continue to pay high carbon taxes and struggle with affording rent and groceries, while this government plays fast and loose with taxpayer dollars, appointing friends to boards who serve their own financial interests while Canadians get no environmental benefit. Ms. Method is implicated in mismanaging and mishandling $42 million of taxpayer funds by awarding contracts to companies she had financial interests in. How is it that this government, and though it was as though it was perfectly fine to appoint her to the Canada Infrastructural Bank, does not need to answer questions? We know that Ms. Method tendered her resignation from the bank in April. We have her resignation letter from the bank. We know that this Liberal government has also been embarrassed by the revelations of this mismanagement by the fund, that they decided a week ago to abolish the Green Slush Fund. However, none of this absolves Ms. Method or this Liberal government or this minister from answering to Canadians about what they knew, when they knew it, and how this happened, and how deep this corruption goes. I am certain that the government members here on this committee will welcome and support the investigation so that Canadians can have answers, because Canadians do indeed deserve answers. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lewis. I have on the speaking list Mr. Biddle. Mr. Biddle, Dr. Biddle. Mr. Biddle, the floor is yours.
Definitely not doctor. I know lawyers have tried to gone to Juris Doctor, but I don't think we're even bold enough to even attempt that. But it's a little disappointing. I'm old enough to remember when Conservatives cared about rural and remote communities, and we have witnesses here who are ready to testify and provide answers. I know Ms. Lewis represents a rural community, but she's close enough to Pearson where I guess this doesn't matter. What she has left out is that this has been under study from 2 other committees. So her pretense that this is urgent and shocking and it hasn't been touched by Parliament before is a bit misleading. Her motion, even though she acknowledges that the committee has received the resignation letter and a detailed summary of the projects and funds that oversaw during her time on the CIB board, her motion doesn't actually reflect that. I really just want to hear from the witnesses. I know this committee has a agreement that studies go from party to party, and I believe the Conservative Party is up next, but I believe this is best addressed by scheduling a business committee meeting. I'd like to hear from the witnesses today, so I move that we adjourn debate now that Ms. Lewis has her Facebook clip.
Thank you very much, Mr. Biddle. So we'll go, we'll just wait for all members to return to the table. And then, which is usually not the case. And I'll now turn it over to the clerk. Madam Clerk.
You're voting on the motion to adjourn the debate.
Point of order, I don't believe that we can if there's somebody else on the list. Is there somebody else on the list?
There's nobody on the list. Yeah, you can. And you can, but yeah.
Yeah.
There's nobody.
So, Mr. Bitter,
Yes.
Monsieur Iacono,
Oui.
Ms. Shanahan,
Oui.
Mr. Fillmore,
Yes.
Mr. Rogers,
Yes.
Mr. Straw,
No.
Mr. Muse,
No.
Mr. Lewis,
No.
Mr. Fast,
No.
Monsieur Barcelo Duval,
No.
Mr. Backrack,
No.
5 yeas, 6 nays.
The motion is defeated. I have Mr. Biddle and then Mr. Backrack. Mr. Biddle.
Well, I'll defer to Mr. Backrack first, and my name go back on the list.
Okay, Mr. Backrack, floor is yours.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. And this is an issue of concern to us, as it is to many Canadians. However, some of this information, I believe, the House of Commons already has in its possession, including the resignation letter. And as Mr. Biddle, or Dr. Biddle, rather, was we're just bugging you now, Chris, sorry. As he mentioned earlier, this committee does have a longstanding practice of ensuring that each party has the ability to bring forward a study in turn. I know that not every committee has that practice. And if we wish to abandon the practice, I suppose that can be done at any time. It's certainly not in the standing orders. It has led to a committee that is more convivial than most, more collaborative than most. I've certainly appreciated it, having been on the committee for 4 years. And last time, certain members tried to double stack studies on topics of interest to their party. There were protestations from Mr. Strahl that this was contrary to our practice as a committee, and I backed him up on that, and eventually we got back to the practice that we had. So I'm happy to pursue this study, but I would note that we just finished a study on Lynx Air, which was a conservative study, and so perhaps I'll ask you, Mr. Chair, or perhaps Madam Clerk, through you, Mr. Chair, what the next study this committee plans to undertake is, because I understand we have a work plan and the time is ticking down prior to the summer recess. So with that information, maybe we can decide where this falls. I'm more than happy to study this. I would also note that this is a topic of study at the Industry Committee, and the Industry Committee has already held several meetings on this topic. So, while there may be a desire to have every committee preoccupied with this issue, I think we can efficiently get answers for Canadians utilizing the committee that is most relevant to the issue at hand. And the simple fact that she was appointed to and then resigned from the board of the Infrastructure Bank seems a bit of a tenuous connection to the mandate of our committee, which is infrastructure and transportation. I represent a rural community. Air travel to rural Canada, to Northwest British Columbia, is a matter of urgent concern for the people I represent, who are paying as much as $1,200 to fly between northern BC communities and Vancouver, which is unaffordable for many families. And they want to see greater competition, they want to see lower prices, and they want to see more affordability in the air sector. And that's really the topic that we're trying to get to the bottom of today. I think it's something that might not be of urgent concern to urban Canadians, folks in the big metropolitan centers that are served by, several airlines, if not dozens of airlines. But it's something that really matters to small places, to Canada's north. And I'm hoping that the recommendations from this report can really push the government in a direction that results in better affordability for those areas. And we don't have that many meetings left before the summer break. I'm hoping at some of our future meetings, we'll hear from the witnesses that I put forward, including the mayors of Northwest BC communities. And I'd love to hear from some of the smaller airlines that have tried to compete in these smaller markets and have had to exit for various reasons, and to better understand what those reasons are. So, I didn't vote to adjourn debate. I think there's a version of this that I can get on board with, and that would be to carve off the piece about a study and deal with that issue at a future business meeting when we talk about the work plan for the committee. I think that's a fair approach. Simply ordering the production of the resignation letter, a comprehensive and detailed summary of the projects and funds, and any internal communications, I think that's certainly relevant. As I mentioned, some of that information is already in the possession of the House of Commons. So I would move, Mr. Chair, that we amend the motion by removing all the words after her resignation from the board.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Backrack. So we have a motion on the floor to amend the motion tabled by Dr. Lewis. Just in response to Mr. Backrack's inquiries about the next steps for the committee, I'll share with everyone that we still have to conclude the study that we're currently working on right now on rural and remote airports. Following that, we still have on our items of things to attend to the review, the clause by clause, and consideration of recommendations for the study that we just left off on Tuesday about HFR. And then following that, we go into our normal rotation, which would have the Bloc Québécois up next, followed by the NDP. And the Bloc Québécois have on the table currently regulations about je pense que c'est navigation fluviale. Je pense que c'est ça encore.
I believe it was about river navigation. Is that correct?
And then after that, we only have one for you, Mr. Backrack, which I believe is still on the towing vessels, if that hasn't changed. So that's where we are now. That's where we left off. I don't think we'll be getting to either the Bloc Québécois study or yours, Mr. Backrack, before the fall. And if we're really lucky, we'll be able to conclude this study and possibly conclude going through the HFR study. I see your hand up, Mr. Schroll. I have added your name, so you can put your hand down. Okay, I see that you have. All right, with that, I'll turn the floor over to you, Mr. Biddle.
Is Monsieur Barcelou Duval on the list?
He is after you, so it's you, Mr. Biddle.
Okay,
so je vais passer la parole à vous, Monsieur Barcelou Duval.
Mr. Barcelou Duval. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would also like to underscore that I would like us to have an opportunity to address this as quickly as possible so that we can hear our witnesses who have come here today to deal with a very important subject that is air travel in northern rural and remote communities. And this has been underway for a long time now, and I think it's high time that we focus on it. And it is also as a matter of respect vis-à-vis the witnesses joining us today. This being said, however, I do not want to give the impression that I don't believe that this motion before us is important and that it does not merit any further attention. So I would like to make a few comments regarding this motion that is on the table. Firstly, and I do believe that several others have already mentioned it, in the documents that are requested regarding the motion before us, if you look at points A and B, the letter of resignation by André-Lise Métaux, I do believe that this was sent to the committee. I think it's less relevant now than at that time. Similarly to point B, a detailed description of a comprehensive detailed summary of the projects and funds that she oversaw during her time on the CIB board that was already provided to us as a document. So I believe that this is no longer as relevant. Perhaps there might be item C, which might still be somewhat relevant for the committee. There's another point I'd also like to raise, that in the introduction of the motion, it was mentioned that the Auditor General and the Commissioner of Ethics and has focused on the SDDC. However, that is not true. The Auditor General is not currently undertaking this study, but might be regarding doing a study on this subject. So, in fact, there was a quite catastrophic finding of how costs are managed. So those would be my first comments that I would like to bring to the committee. Now, calling the witnesses, I would need some additional explanation as to why Dominique Leblanc is being mentioned, why others. I understand Mr. Métaux, I understand Mr. Corey, but I have a hypothesis as to what we would want to invite Mr. Leblanc and Ms. Huntley, but perhaps I would like to hear this from the mover motion that would enable for me to better understand the relevance of this. There's another item that I would also like to submit to you for your consideration is this. It seems to me that having to call each of these individuals alone for 2 hours each is quite a great deal of time. I think it's also quite intimidating for these persons to have to appear for 2 hours. I believe that Ms. Métaux resigned from the Infrastructure Bank, that she also resigned from the SDDC. the Sustainable Development Technologies Canada Fund, which is no longer managed by the bank. But at the same time, there is a study underway by the Ethics Commission. I think it's good to wait to see what the outcome will be. And I have the sense that, at least that is my fear, that in a sense we're undertaking kind of witch hunt. And how can I frame this? That we're setting up an inquisition tribunal focusing on an individual. I think that she has the right to defend herself. And nor am I against the fact that she come and testify and that we do our work as a committee, but on the other hand, there are also other studies underway and inquiries underway. So it seems to me that having a single meeting where all of these cited witnesses appear would enable us to advance further and more quickly. So my concern, of course, is to have simply one individual there without having sufficient information. That concludes my comments, but as to Mr. Bachrach's amendment, I'll continue to think about it because I will defer to let others take over. Thank you, Mr. Barcelo Duval. Mr. Biddle.
For 5 minutes and talk about this offline rather than burning through the witnesses, because I think there is still interest in hearing from these witnesses.
In the interests of ensuring that we can somehow get to our witnesses today and possibly conclude both of these items, I will suspend for 5 minutes and allow members to talk offline, and we'll see if we can make some progress. The meeting is suspended. Thanks for your patience, everyone. I have on my list up next Mr. Strahl. Mr. Strahl, if you're there you are, sir. Okay, so we'll turn the floor over to you, followed by Dr. Lewis, followed by Mr. Biddle. So, Mr. Strahl, the floor is yours.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Oh, I don't know why that happened. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think that we can move to a vote on this. I think we want the original motion to pass. So if we need to have a discussion or a vote on an amendment, we're happy to have this matter dealt with at the committee right now. And a standing order 1082, from my reading of it, it's not a 1064. This does not compel this to go to the top of the order. It merely indicates that this is something that the committee wishes to study. I can, if the chair or the clerk want to correct me on that, that is my understanding. So that any worries about this suddenly cleaving in half our study on northern rural airports or air access, I think is unfounded. This will simply be something that the committee has expressed an interest in pursuing further, which I think, clearly we've heard that there is an interest in pursuing it further. We can discuss how that goes, but I think we can dispose of this rather quickly. We're anxious to speak to the witnesses from both panels, so we're happy to have this go to the votes necessary to deal with this matter.
Thank you, Mr. Strahl. I'll turn it over to Dr. Lewis.
I just wanted to speak briefly to a matter raised by Mr. Basson Duval pertaining to the relevance of the witnesses. And I think in the motion, witness A, Andre Lees Method, the relevance is obvious. That's the person that with the alleged conflict. B, Jane Huntley, PCO Director of Appointments, obviously had some involvement in appointing the person with the alleged conflict. C, Dominique LeBlanc was the minister at the time that was in charge of this portfolio when the appointment took place. And I think, as Mr. Basson Duval rightly said, the president of the Canada Infrastructure Bank, Mr. Aaron Corey, would be relevant. I want to remind this committee that we're dealing with the mishandling of 42 million taxpayer dollars. This is a very serious matter, and the SDTC was found in 90 conflicts of interest. Yet, this individual was appointed to the Canada Infrastructure Bank, and we know that 59 million of the projects that were dispensed and were funded, 10 of them were to ineligible projects. So this is a very, very serious issue that taxpayers need answers to, and I encourage my colleagues to take it in that vein. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lewis. We'll go to Mr. Bachrach, who had his hand up next.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I appreciate Mr. Strahl's remarks about the timing. That was my primary concern, just given where we're at in the session. So if this is simply a matter of getting this in the queue as part of the committee's overall work plan, and showing that the committee expresses an interest in the topic, which I think we all agree is an important one, I'll, at the risk of seeming contradictory, I'll vote against my amendment, and I'm happy to support the motion as moved. Provided that that's the shared understanding that it'll go into the work plan, and we'll have a discussion in the future about when we address it. It could be that by the time we get to it, some of these questions will have been answered by the other committees that are working on it and the debate in the House of Commons as we speak.
Thank you, Mr. Bachrach. And finally, I'll turn it over to Mr. Biddle.
Well, I guess that's disappointing that the NDP will vote against their own amendment. But I think having heard Dr. Lewis's comments, I think that highlights that the study isn't relevant to this committee. I know the Conservatives, with respect to the supply day debate today on this subject and the discussion of the organization and multiple other committees. I take the point from, I believe it was Mr. Baccarat himself, who said that it was a tenuous link between Dr. Baccarat, tenuous link between this study and the actual mandate of this committee. I tend to come to this committee only when we're discussing infrastructure issues, and it tends to be that there is a interest in the Canada Infrastructure Bank. I think there's ideological opposition to it with respect to all of the opposition parties for three distinctly different reasons. It's a despite the fact that I know there were some challenges when it first started out, but we're seeing excellent work by the bank in securing, I believe it's almost $32 billion in private capital towards 56 projects, which benefit ridings across the country. And I'm happy to have Mr. Corey come and testify. Everyone thinks they'll have a gotcha question, and he actually shows and is very good at outlining the actual work that the committee does. Project after project, infrastructure projects that won't get built. I hear from, in my role as parliamentary secretary on housing, infrastructure, and communities, I meet not only with members of parliament, members of the opposition, I meet with mayors, representatives, Indigenous leaders across the country. And one of the number one items, including from the members who are looking at me hoping that I'll stop talking, is we need more infrastructure. And what better way to, including the witnesses who testified today, we need better infrastructure with respect to airports, but with respect to all items across the board. And what better way to do that than help leverage private capital? And the Conservatives were on side when it was the Harper government, public-private partnerships. And it's fine. We call it a different thing. Maybe if it's just a name, we change the name of the Canada Infrastructure Bank, the Conservatives will be on side. We'll go back to calling it whatever Stephen Harper called it, and we'll be on side. We even had Lisa Raitt publicly compliment one of the projects from the Canada Infrastructure Bank that I know the Conservatives are most furious about. The former, I believe she was deputy leader of the Conservative Party, understands in her role now with, I believe, CIBC, the importance of that work. So we can keep coming back to this time after time after time. But even let's look at what Indu has done. The study was a recent investigation and reports on Sustainable Development Technology Canada. So they had 1 hour with Andre Lee's Mithone. She appeared November 28th. 1.5 hours on December 5th. There was a meeting on December 11th. There's another meeting on December 12th. Another meeting on December 14th, which brought us to the Christmas break. 1 hour meeting on January 31st, and another meeting on June 5th. With respect to the Ethics Committee, they also did a study. And allegations related to governance and management of contributions by Sustainable Technology Canada. Maybe we in Parliament should become better at creating our study names. A little dry, but very important topic. At Ethics, 2 meetings. And at Public Accounts on June 6th, 2 hours. Sustainable Development, Report 6 on Sustainable Development Technology Canada. I think Monsieur Barcelou Duval called it a witch hunt. Maybe it's more of a fishing expedition, and we should report this to the Fisheries Committee for their study. But that's what we have. I don't know. I appreciate the vigor of the opposition to try to keep pulling at the threads, but we've been there before. I'm hoping that we can come back to the original amendment, but I'm hoping maybe perhaps and just throw it at the wall, see if it works, Mr. Chair. Perhaps we could suspend again for a few minutes, maybe. If not, I'm happy to keep going. But perhaps if we could suspend for a few minutes and see what we can do.
Okay, so what I'm going to do this time, I'm going to put a timer on for 2 minutes. If we cannot hammer something out in 2 minutes, my proposal, colleagues, is that we resume, we vote, and then we get to our witnesses, and I'm going to propose, with everybody's agreement, that we bring in all the witnesses and we spend the remaining hour asking questions to whomever we choose. Do I have agreement for that? Okay, so we'll suspend for 2 minutes and we'll come back and hopefully have a consensus. unanimous consent to deviate from the discussion that we were having on Dr. Lewis's motion, as well as the amendment put forward by Mr. Bachrach, in order to provide 5 minutes each to our 3 witnesses that we have not heard from today to provide their opening remarks. I do have unanimous consent. Okay, so with that, colleagues, I'd like to introduce Ms. Gina Bento, Founding Chief Executive Officer for Arctic Aviation, as well as Canadian Union of Public Employees representative, Monsieur Sylvain Chetang, Senior Researcher, joining us by video conference. Bienvenue à vous. And
welcome to you.
One Air LP, we have David White, Chief Executive Officer, joining us by video conference. Ms. Bento, we will turn the floor over to you to get things started for 5-minute opening remarks. The floor is yours.
Mr. Chair, members of Parliament, fellow Canadians, participants in today's proceedings, good afternoon. I will do my best to keep it to 5 minutes. Firstly, thank you, Mr. Chair, to you and to all members of Parliament for your dedicated service to our country. It is much appreciated. It is an honor to be invited to speak with you this afternoon. Thank you. I stand before you as an aviation professional working on restoring aviation to the Arctic. I'm the president of the Arctic Aviation Revitalization, and up until a short while ago was the National Civil Aviation Advisor for the U.S. Embassy in Canada, a role I played for over 14 years. I also come from a long line of aviation professionals, from airlines to defense. I would like to also express my honor for the Aboriginal people of Canada. I hope to contribute to their well-being. What we're facing today is a dire situation in the Arctic. Over numerous decades, aviation in the Arctic has evolved out of necessity. The Arctic represents about 40% of Canada's territory. During various consultations with Northern community leaders, they stated that they considered the aviation as their trans-Canada highway. However, if we're to continue using this analogy going forward, Mr. Chair, the situation before us is not one merely about fixing potholes, but rather one where entire stretches of this highway have now been severely compromised, needing immediate attention. Aviation is a necessary tool for Arctic communities to connect to one another and the rest of Canada and the world, and receive the goods they need, not just for their survival, but also for their proper functioning. Up until recently, the Boeing 737-200 was the main aircraft used to carry goods in the Arctic. However, in 2014, Boeing announced to industry and governments worldwide that they will no longer be providing gravel kits for the aircraft. Furthermore, Boeing is restricting all newer aircraft from landing on gravel. In our north, Mr. Chair, there are 117 remote airports, of which only 7 are paved. As a result, airlines are now resorting to using turboprops. However, this situation is untenable, as these aircraft can only carry about 30% of the cargo and less than half of the passengers. These planes also have less range, are less fuel efficient, and noisy. Climate change is further aggravating the state of aviation in the Arctic. The melting of the permafrost is causing grave soil destabilization, and the further north you go, the worse it is. Our Arctic airports are in a precarious situation, and our asphalts are cracking at unprecedented levels. The Iqaluit Airport alone had over $300 million worth of damage done to it, despite it being a very new airport. Thus, the combination of modern jet aircraft needs, along with a climate change-induced permafrost melting situation, it is creating a huge problem for aviation in the Arctic. The populations in the north are suffering. The situation is dire in an environment already facing water and housing crises. People living in the Arctic today face worse living conditions than they just did a few years ago. The data is staggering. For example, over 46% of people in Nunavut live in households facing food insecurity. For the first time ever, a group of Canadians is faring worse than their previous generations, and much worse than the rest of Canada. Thus, the impetus to act is upon us. I am not advocating that we should not take the time to carefully analyze the entire situation of aviation in the Arctic and do this community by community. But what I am saying is that facing a humanitarian crisis and also a well-known defense issue. We all know that China and Russia keep flexing their muscles in the region. Thus, we cannot afford to wait. It is incumbent upon us to look at what we know today and what we have on hand to bring some form of relief. We need to take some concrete action. The entire region needs to be stabilized. Thus, my ask is for your support to address this situation on hand while we look into formulating a longer-term game plan for bettering aviation in the Arctic. In addition to asphalt, there does exist another runway surface that has been used for decades: aluminum. In fact, aluminum has been used by the US military and other militaries worldwide since the 70s, and I could provide more details on this. They have done this very successfully worldwide. I have been speaking to the Minister of Transportation senior advisors, the Minister of Defense, the Minister of Northern Affairs concerning this issue. It is my belief that if we can equip communities that have lost access to Boeing jet aircraft service with this same technology in the short term, we can reap huge gains and lift the entire Arctic region out of the present critical situation it is facing. We cannot afford to wait any longer. If the differences in cargo and passengers, Mr. Chair, were less than 10 to 15%, I would say we could wait. But we're looking at differences over 70%. I look forward to your questions. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Ms. Bento. You were only 11 seconds over time, and we appreciate that very much. Thank you so much. Next, we will go with Monsieur Chatang. Monsieur Chatang, je vous passe la parole.
Mr. Chatang, the floor is yours for 5 minutes, please. Yes, of course. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the members of the committee for welcoming me in spite of the fact that I'm remote, and I apologize due to family obligations. Mr. Chatang, I'm sorry, there's a point of order from Mr. Barcelou Duval. There's simply no sound on the French channel. If I go on another channel, I can hear the gentleman, but there was no interpretation for the previous witness. I'd just like to mention that because it seems to me that it's not a normal situation.
So we're just going to do a quick test here to make sure the translation is working, and they've asked me to speak in French for a couple of sentences to make sure that everything's working fine. Do we have translation in French? And is the English coming through? I see a nodding head in disagreement by Mr. Barcelou Duval. So what we're going to do is, in order to rectify this, why don't we suspend for 2 minutes to get this rectified? Merci, Monsieur Chatang.
Thank you, Mr. Chatang.
We just want to make sure that we can hear from you in both official languages. The meeting is suspended for 2 minutes. believe that the audiovisual issues have been rectified and we now do have translation. Donc, Monsieur Chatang, je vous passe encore une fois
Mr.
la
Shankang, the floor is yours again, 5 minutes.
Members of the committee, thank you for extending the invitation to the Canadian Union of Public Employees to speak to you today on Competition Act and air travel in northern, rural, and remote communities in Canada. QP is Canada's largest union, representing 740,000 workers, including more than 1,500 flight attendants, among other workers in air transportations in Canada. Canada Air Transportation strategy and system has been built around two major market-oriented ideas. First, the need to increase competition between airlines with the expectation that it will create more air travel options and put downward pressures on price paid by travelers. Second, the cost for air traveling should be absorbed by the users of air transportation. But after more than 35 years of this market-oriented experiment, evidence is showing that the race to the bottom between airlines did not deliver the expected outcomes for air travelers and communities, as well as for workers in airlines in Canada. Airlines are businesses. They're going to fly where the money is, and they will do all they can to maximize profit, including cutting costs and services. Their goal is not to increase competition in air traveling, it is to make profit. This race for more profits via low and extra low fare carrier has major impacts on services across Canada. Airlines, small and big, are merging to continue to grow and increase their control over some market. For instance, airlines in the north, like First Air and Canadian North, merge to maintain services, while others are leaving or decreasing services in northern, rural, and remote areas for more profitable domestics or international flights from or to large urban areas. Furthermore, airlines are continuing to force their employees to work unpaid hours to make more profits, and the federal government is complicit about it. Meanwhile, the existing competitive laws or policies will not appropriately investigate the impact of all these turbulences in air traveling on airline workers, especially when mergers occurs. To deal with all these turbulence we see in air traveling in Canada, some will call for more competition and more deregulations. They will call for more of the same approach that has left us where we are today. As if the call for across-the-board reductions of taxes and fees and across-the-board abolitions of existing barrier to competition would be the magic solutions to increase access to air transportation in the north, rural, and remote areas. More needs to be done. QP believes that access to air transportation in these areas is not a luxury. It is essential for the economic development of all parts of Canada, for tourism industry, as well as for the health of many people living in Canada forced to travel south or to larger communities to get specialized health care. What we need is not more deregulation. We need to move toward a demarketization of air transportation, especially in the north, in rural and remote communities across Canada. QP recommends 3 propositions to make air transportations more accessible, more affordable, more frequent in those areas. First, mandatory and price control services to remote areas as a means to maintain an air carrier license in Canada, a solution that has been somewhat in line with what has been recommended by this committee in the past. Maintaining and expanding public and or not-for-profit ownerships of airlines and airports, and or subsidize airports to reduce costs to passengers if needed, and or subsidizing directly travelers using not-for-profits and publicly owned airlines going to those areas as a means to compensate high cost, high user fees paid by these travelers and airlines in these areas. Strategies to demarketize may vary based on locations and needs, but they all have in common more government interventions when market-oriented strategies are failing. Across-the-board deregulations and cut in fees and taxes would only limit different levels of government's ability to intervene in these areas to broaden access to air travel in those parts of the country. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Chatang.
Thank you, Mr. Chatang.
Mr. White, the floor is yours. You have 5 minutes for your opening remarks, please, sir.
Thank you, and good morning, honorable members of the committee, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today on this important topic. My name is Dave White. I am the CEO of Keewatin Air LP. Keewatin Air is one of the most comprehensive aeromedical organizations in Canada, providing extensive 24-hour emergency air ambulance services, including the delivery of industry-leading health and emergency services to Canada's Arctic region. Our company is a member of the Exchange Income Corporation family of air operators, a group of 10 Canadian-owned air operators providing air ambulance, flight training, scheduled passenger, charter, rotary wing, and comprehensive aerospace services. Collectively, we work from coast to coast to coast as essential service providers in some of Canada's most remote communities, and by extension, some of Canada's most challenging aviation environments. At EIC, we know we are vital to the communities we serve, and we always take our responsibilities seriously in that respect. Throughout our history, we have established a track record of proactively doing business as a responsible and conscientious community partner. Keewatin Air operates multiple Beechcraft King Air 200 and B200 aircraft dedicated on a 24/7, 365 basis to air ambulance operations that are complemented by our Pilatus PC-12s and Cessna Citation 560. Together, these aircraft transport over 3,000 patients annually, covering 2.3 million medevac miles in Canada's most challenging operating environments. Keewatin maintains bases of operations in Winnipeg, Churchill, and Thompson, Manitoba, Igloolik, Iqaluit, Rankin Inlet and Cambridge Bay in Nunavut, and Yellowknife in the Northwest Territories. Like many other EIC air operators, Keewatin Air has developed essential services to northern remote communities for over 50 years and employs over 250 Canadians. Keewatin's past, present, and future as an air operator in Canada are deeply tied to our northern heritage. That said, Keewatin is a contracted medical transportation provider and not a provider of scheduled airline passenger services. As such, our ability as a company to provide insight to this committee on how air travel in northern, rural, and remote communities is impacted by the Competition Act is limited. We can speak only to our own experience. I can volunteer some insights in that respect as to factors faced by all air operators, which may limit the amount of competition the northern communities into which we operate can support. Excuse me. First, the investments and costs associated with the establishment and maintenance of any aviation operation in northern Canada far exceed costs that would be incurred in the south. Infrastructure building and maintenance costs are higher, while the construction season is short, labor costs are elevated, it is difficult to attract and retain qualified staff, and maintenance and supply chains for spare parts are both more complicated and more expensive. The operation itself is challenging and prone to weather disruptions, which again drive costs up. That series of conditions isn't unique to aviation in the North. It's broadly understood across industries that costs associated with doing business in Canada's northern, rural, and remote communities are going to be elevated no matter what industry you're in. The second factor driving costs for northern aviation operations is the application of the uniquely Canadian user pay principle to the maintenance and development of aviation infrastructure. Broadly speaking, user pay means exactly that the end user or passenger pays not just for the cost of his or her transportation or medical transportation or cargo shipment, but rather they pay for the journey plus the imposed costs associated with the maintenance and support of every part of the aviation supply chain that supports their journey. These government-related fees can include air traffic fees, terminal charges, airport improvement fees, security fees. The list is endless. In southern markets, these costs can be distributed across a large traveling population. In the north, with smaller communities separated by greater distances, these costs are borne disproportionately by end users, making travel more expensive, likely decreasing demand, and discouraging competition. In conclusion, while Keewatin Air's primary focus remains on providing critical medical transport services, the challenges we face in operating in the North mirror those faced by all aviation services in these regions. The elevated costs of operation, combined with the principles of user pay, create a landscape where competition is difficult to sustain, ultimately impacting the affordability and accessibility of air travel for northern, rural, and remote communities. Thank you for your time and attention. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Mr. White, for your opening remarks. I will now turn the floor back to the discussion that we were having on Dr. Lewis's motion, as well as the amendment that was put forward by Mr. Bachrach. And next in line, I had Mr. Biddle to speak. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you so much. Hopefully we can get this done quickly. And so I'll first ask for unanimous consent to withdraw Mr. Bachrach's amendment.
Okay, do I have unanimous consent to withdraw Mr. Bachrach's amendment? I see nodding heads in favor, so withdrawn. Mr. Biddle.
Excellent. So I do propose an amendment. Hopefully this is something we can all agree to or all walk away a little bit unhappy, which is, as I was told in law school, a sign of a good settlement. So having the understanding that there's some, maybe more than some inaccuracies, I guess depending who you ask, with the first two paragraphs, I would amend the motion by striking those two paragraphs. The next amendment would be changing 7 days to 30 days. And the rest of the motion would remain.
Okay, so does everybody understand the terms of the amendment proposed by Mr. Biddle, or do we require clarification? Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. It's basically the first two paragraphs and replacing 7 days with 30 days. Any questions, comments, discussion on the amendment proposed by Mr. Biddle? Yes, Dr. Lewis.
Yes, may I have the rationale for us extending it 30 days, which is beyond the time that we will be sitting for this session?
Mr. Biddle?
Well, it's just you're asking an organization to go through and do a comprehensive study, as we've heard from the CIB routinely. The due diligence that they do on projects is extensive. And though I know the Conservatives have been critical of the due diligence that they do, I think they want to ensure that they're in full compliance with an order, because then it becomes an issue of contempt. And like I'm happy to change it to request from an order, but if we're going to do an order, let's at least give a reasonable period of time to ensure that all documents are provided.
Thank you, Mr. Biddle. Any other questions, comments? Yes, Mr. Bachrach.
I think the key thing around the timeline for the document production is the time required for translation. And given that we don't know how many documents there are, it's probably better to err a little bit on the side of caution. Our practice at OGO, another very convivial and cooperative committee that I have the pleasure of sitting on, is 21 days for document production. And that so far has allowed all sorts of documents to be translated and produced for the community to look at. So I don't know, Mr. Biddle, if he'd be open to 21 days. At a certain point, it feels like we're splitting hairs. I think the goal here is to get the documents and to provide enough time for the translation services, who I know are under considerable pressure to conduct their work. So, yeah, I'm inclined to support the 30 days, unless there's a strong argument for 7 days. Seems like quite a short amount of time, considering there might be potentially a lot of documents.
Thank you, Mr. Bachrach. I see Mr. Strahl's hands up. Mr. Strahl, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I think I just would like some clarification here. Obviously, we would prefer that we receive this while the House is in session. So perhaps that would be more of a 14-day type of a timeline. If 7 is unreasonable, I think we can argue about that if we want to. But if the majority of committee votes in favor of Mr. Biddle's amendment to delete the beginning of this motion and to amend the number of days. What does the committee have the ability to receive that during an adjournment, and or are we looking then at September 15th before these documents are actually turned over to us? So I guess I just want some clarification. I think 30 days is too long. I think that punts this into the summer and outside of the accountability function of a sitting parliament. So I would oppose it, but I'm just wondering what the implications are if it does pass in terms of our ability to receive documents under an order.
Thank you, Mr. Strahl. The clerk is currently researching that information, and we're going to try and get that back to you as soon as she receives it. And I know that's important information for you, so we'll try not to go to a vote before you receive that. I would imagine it's contingent on what the response is. Yes, Dr. Lewis.
Mr. Biddle raised concerns about the first two paragraphs, but in his discussion, he really focused largely on the information in paragraph A pertaining to the Auditor General, et cetera. I'm concerned about just deleting paragraph B because it goes to the fundamentals of the motion, being that an individual resigned after it was found that there was a conflict of interest, or there was an apparent, or there was an appearance of a conflict of interest, to say such. And so I'm concerned about deleting B and his reasons why he would want to delete paragraph B.
Thank you, Dr. Lewis. Mr. Biddle.
I don't know that points of clarification are a thing, but this is what we're proposing. The substantive motion, the substantive motion remains. I think this is a agreeable compromise, since not just me has specified that these, essentially the whereas clauses, which have no, which don't provide the substance of what the committee is going to do, is what's at stake here. I think we can just agree to the substance with the one change. I believe the chair is going to provide us with an answer to Mr. Strahl's question.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Biddle. So I can confirm that the clerk will send correspondence received to committee members regardless if the House is in session or not. So that information, once received by the clerk, will be shared with all members, Mr. Strahl. Did I have any other hands up? Was that a hand, Mr. Bachrach, or are you copacetic?
I guess my question, Mr. Chair, with regard to the first paragraph, paragraph A, I'm just wondering if someone can clarify if this matter is still under investigation by the Auditor General.
Good question, Mr. Bachrach. We'll look into that. So, Mr. Bachrach, based on the facial expression I just received from the clerk, it does not look like we'll be able to get that information in a timely manner, perhaps 15 minutes prior. However,
that was published, I guess, I don't know.
Yeah, we don't know if it's that. So we can't confirm that at the moment.
My understanding, Mr. Chair, is that the Auditor General has released a report on this topic. So I'm just
So there was a report released June 4th, 2 days ago. Yeah, that was entitled Sustainable Development Technology Canada, Significant Lapses in Governance as Stewardship of Public Funds at Sustainable Development Technology Canada. So it is publicly available for members to access and read.
wondering, like, I think it's somewhat inaccurate to state that it's under investigation, given that the AG has provided the report. So I would just offer that.
Okay. So I see no other hands up. I will now turn it over to the clerk for a vote on the amendment proposed by Mr. Biddle. Madam Clerk.
Mr. Biddle?
Yes.
Monsieur Iacono?
Oui.
Ms. Shanahan?
Oui.
Mr. Fillmore? Mr. Fillmore? Mr. Rogers? Mr. Stroll?
No.
Mr. Muse?
No.
Mr. Lewis?
No.
Mr. Fast?
No.
Monsieur Bersalou Duval?
Wait.
Mr. Backrack?
Yes.
7 yeas, 4 nays.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. So now we'll move to a vote on the motion proposed by Dr. Lewis as amended. On division? No?
No, I'd like a recorded
We're
vote.
going to have a recorded vote. Madam Clerk, I turn the floor over to you once again.
Sure. Mr. Vito?
Yes.
Mr. Iacono?
Oui.
Ms. Shanahan?
Yes.
Mr. Fillmore?
Yes.
Mr. Rogers?
Yes.
Mr. Stroll?
Yes.
Mr. Muse?
Yes.
Mr. Lewis?
Yes.
Mr. Fast?
Oui.
Monsieur Bersalou Duval?
Wait.
Mr. Backrack?
Yes.
11 yeas, 0 nays.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. So the motion as amended carries. Colleagues, that allows us now to return to questioning to the witnesses that have so generously given us their time today. What I'm proposing, colleagues, and this will require, I guess, approval from members, is that I'm going to try and get through 2 rounds. I'll adjust things a little bit by taking the first round and reducing everybody's time to 4 minutes each. That'll give us 16 minutes, followed by a second round where all members would get another 4 minutes. That would be 32 minutes, which would bring us to exactly 1:15. And if there's a gentleman's agreement to not pull any surprises, if members have to leave because they have other things going on, then we'll just let all the other members that want to ask questions, and we'll adjourn at 1:16. Do I have any objection from members on that? Seeing none. I will now turn the floor over to, I guess we'll start with you.
Mr. Stroll.
Mr. Strahl first?
Yes.
Okay, so Mr. Strahl, I'll turn the floor over to you for 4 minutes. The floor is yours, sir. And we just to remind all members, we have all of our witnesses available for questioning right now.
Okay,
So,
thank
floor is
Thank
yours.
you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for their patience and for sticking around. I did want to talk to the Air Transport Association. I noted in the memo that I've read from you, you had a number of concerns about the impact of some government policies on northern airports specifically. I wanted to get your comments. You talked about, I think in very strong language, about the proposed changes to the APPR, calling them outrageous and that they will result in diminished services and higher costs for air travel in Canada, mostly affecting those in northern and remote communities. So I'm hoping you can give us some comments on that, and if there's time to deal with the concerns about the approach ban that would also disproportionately impact rural and northern airports.
Thank you. Briefly, yes. Basically, government policies in general are really, as I mentioned, hindering the competitiveness, and most affected by these are the northern and regional people because of the service that we try to provide in those regions. APPR, yes. We've had, in the last few years, we've had a number of policies, be it flight and duty time, be it APPR. Immigration right now also is really hurting us. These are all policies that are doing anything but contribute to our competitiveness. And we're really asking the government to give us a break here when we're trying to do things. And we would expect the government policy to be helping us rather than hindering us.
So specifically on the APPR, what do you think what would the impact be, I guess, on those northern communities? Do you believe that because of the onerous nature of the proposal, that airlines would either couldn't risk serving those communities any longer because of the punitive nature of the proposed changes to the APPR? What exactly are we talking about there that would be so detrimental to those northern communities?
Well, the cost of APPR is escalate. It would escalate significantly if the proposed rules that are being discussed now would come into effect, and that cost and the cost recovery that they're proposing, which would just basically drive those markets to be just not profitable at all. And actually, when the compensation is so high, it becomes a decision rather to just cancel the flight way out rather than have to be late or not being able to render the services on time. I mean, there's a domino effect. What they're proposing is that, if a flight is delayed somewhere, they're only allowing the second or third leg of that, or the second leg of that, to be tolerated. Anything beyond that will be punishable, but they don't understand how our airlines function. A plane will land, will go to many different airports in one day, the same plane. And if it's delayed at airport one, it'll be delayed right through. And we're just not getting comprehension from the regulator as far as that goes. So all these things accumulated are just not helping our northern carriers because they work with small, short legs many times, or many legs in a day. And all these regulations are just not adapted to them. And they'll drive costs up to the point where people will be really saying, well, certain routes are not profitable. We just can't do them anymore.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, time's up, Mr. Strahl. Thank you, Mr. McKenna. Next, we'll go up to Mr. Rogers. Mr. Rogers, the floor is yours. You have 4 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for all of the witnesses here today for your presentations and your contributions to this study. I'd like to ask a very simple question and then allow an opportunity for each of you here in the room to speak to. Towards some of the challenges that you face with servicing Canadians in the North, and have you experienced any new challenges since the pandemic period? So we start with Mr. Stout, maybe then Mr. Morrison, Mr. McKenna, Ms. Bento.
Thank you. I think the biggest challenge we've been facing is with labor, specifically pilots and mechanics. I feel like there is a decrease in supply of those individuals during COVID. There certainly was a decrease in demand, and that demand curve came back very quickly, and I don't think supply has been able to keep up. So it's been hitting us not only on the service basis, but also on the cost basis. I think I alluded 13% more pilots to do the same number of flights with a 30% increase in those pilot costs. So, we really want, apt, trained, safe professionals in our planes, and we have to pay for that. And anything the government can do to support bringing more of those individuals into the field is greatly welcome.
Mr. Morrison.
Thank you. And very quickly, with the past 2 years, we've seen I believe 29.5% increase in air navigation fees. We've seen a 33% increase in the air security charge. We have seen dramatic difference between fuel excise taxes in Canada versus the United States. We've seen the more punitive approach being proposed under the APPR, which frankly will do nothing to improve overall air travel. So I think the increasing step-by-step increase in some of the fees we face has proven to be very difficult, not just for mainline carriers, but as Mr. Stout said, for some of the smaller regional carriers.
Appreciate it.
I think to what my colleagues have said, I would just say the lack of infrastructure.
That's really needed. That's what I want to add to these comments. No, they'll turn it on.
Thank you for the question. Indeed, I would also like to reiterate what John just said. Without infrastructure, it is impossible for us to have an optimal aviation sector functioning in the North. We are basically regulating this sector starting from the wrong starting point. Once we have a decent amount of infrastructure in place up there, we'll have a much more realistic picture as to what we need to do in order to make sure that we are allowing our airlines to compete and be able, and as well as deliver a safe service to the Canadian citizens. So I'd like to reiterate that without adequate infrastructure, it is basically impossible to do any laws that make any sense at the moment. We need a two-pronged approach. We need to immediately look at what kind of infrastructure can be put in place right now to lift the Arctic region out of the dire situation it's in. And at the same time, look at what kind of aviation regulations make sense for this type of a region where you've got vast lands, we've got a very small population, very small market. So, and we've got a high commercial interest. Perhaps there's a play there for us to charge companies additional fees to be able to use those types of services. So again, I also second that comment that without, I believe, sir, if we built it, they will come. We need to look at infrastructure in order to really optimize all of aviation.
Quick question for QP. What are some of the challenges that your workers are facing in rural and remote communities working in that environment?
Merci pour la question.
Thank you for the question. Now, you asked the first question, what has changed since COVID? A number of things. It depends on the size of the carrier, the region. There are a lot of essential services that continue to fly during the pandemic. And in some cases, there were layoffs. So that's one thing. Second, the cost of living is increasing, as you know, and it's difficult at the negotiating table. Some people will use that to. So the industry is bringing in record profits. Not everybody lives in big centers either. Some people in the urban centers will. When there's less services, people will use that service less. So that has an impact on our ability to work. Thank you, Mr. Chapin.
Mr. Barcelou-Duval,
Mr. Barcelou-Duval, 4 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to start with Mr. McKenna. You talked about a lot of things in your opening statement, but I think there's one thing that wasn't touched on, that hasn't been touched on a lot with regard to the impact on regional work, or the regions, and it's the shortage of labor. Now, I've heard in the grapevine that we need more pilots than before, and the result is that the large carriers go and poach pilots from smaller carriers, but that the small carriers cannot go get more pilots because we were not training more pilots. And then the consequence of that is that we have to make choices. And in some cases, lines have had to be cut, not because they're not profitable, but because there's not enough staff. So do you have an idea of, or do you have any solutions that could be implemented to counter that problem? I assume that there is a way to make sure that we have enough pilots in the future. Well, the shortage of pilots and technologists, that was a problem before the pandemic. Now, the pandemic pushed people away from our sector. And there was also experienced people who just decided to retire earlier. So we had a net loss of staff in addition to the shortage that already existed before. Now, the big pilot issue is the cost of pilots. That's the biggest problem that we have. And there is no mechanism to help us to pay for the training of pilots. A pilot can have a basic commercial pilot, and it can cost them the thousands of dollars to get that license. But that won't train you for larger aircraft. So, you get a basic license. So it's substantial, it's quite expensive. A lot of people are interested in piloting, but when they see the cost, that turns a lot of them off. So the shortage of maintenance workers is larger than the pilot shortage. So soon we'll have, the planes that can't take off because we don't have enough staff to look after them. All right, so you're saying that the maintenance staff, the shortage is bigger there than for pilots, but the training cost of technicians is a lot lower than pilots. So how do you explain that? How do you explain that difference? Well, we're competing with all the other industries for those same people. So we see people graduating from, training colleges that are hired in other industries that offer easier conditions, that offer conditions that offer a more attractive lifestyle. So we're competing against competing with a lot of industries. So, and it's more and more difficult. People are more and more interested in quality of life than the piloting profession or aviation profession. So thank you. You also said that the user payer model is something that doesn't work in northern and remote regions. So what's the solution for if we want it to be sustainable? The solution is that governments have to contribute as well. So to date, we're paying out a lot of money to the government, and there's not a lot of reinvestment in our sector. So whether it's airport rent or leases, this is a cash cow for the government, but there's no investment in the sector. So, users users can't pay for the approaches in the north. And thank you. Sorry, unfortunately, your time is over.
Thanks for that, Mr. Bacharach. The floor is yours. You have 4 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all of our witnesses. I'll start with a question for Mr. Chalang. Some of the airlines that we've talked to as a committee have suggested that the duty hours regulations are creating delays and impacting their business. And I'm wondering what the view of the flight attendants that you represent is when it comes to delays on regional routes and the duty hours requirements imposed by the government.
Thank you for your questions. I think we got to make a distinction between the duty hours of pilots and duty hours of flight attendants, and I would probably deviate your questions to duty hours of the pilots associations. In terms of hours and duty hours, one thing that is for sure, for your information, members of the committees, is that for flight attendants, when they are at work, not all those hours they are at work are paid. You will be taking a flight probably after this week, going somewhere, and when boarding, you will have assistance of a flight attendant that is working, but that is not considered as paid work, and it's not paid by most airlines in Canada, and we don't think that's acceptable.
It's pretty astounding that flight attendants aren't actually paid for all the hours that they work, and I think as we've seen the rather extreme delays and cancellations over the past number of years, really that problem is exacerbated. I know I've gotten on flights and we had a problem with the aircraft. We got off the flight, waited several hours to get a new plane, got back on. The flight attendants were working that entire time managing passengers, and they weren't getting paid for a single minute of it. So that's something that has to change immediately. When you were talking about the demarketization, which is a new phrase to me, especially of northern and regional air service, it did remind me of the fact that we've heard many times from airlines that they want the fees and charges to be reduced. And I think that's similar to what we hear from most businesses that appear before committee and are asked about affordability. And they say, reduce our fees and charges and we'll make things more affordable. Does the evidence bear that out? Like, the question is, in markets that lack competition, if you're a business and you have a monopoly, or you're part of a duopoly, or you're part of an oligopoly, and the government reduces your costs, what's the incentive for these businesses, in your view? What's the incentive for these businesses to make things more affordable for customers?
In theory and in practice, there's no incentive in those circumstances that you just described. Actually, across the board reductions of fees and taxes in a not perfect market with high competitions will only contribute to increased profits to those airlines.
Seem like we have a different... Oh, go ahead if you want to add on to that.
Yeah, I want to add on to this because we've been hearing a lot about this, basically reduce our fees, reduce our costs, and then the others will come in that perfect world. And We're very worried here that this is actually going to contribute to increased profits of those airlines, but also reduce the capacity of governments, whether it's federal, municipal, or provincial, to reinvest where are the needs, where are the big major needs, and not only reinvest what has been collected, but probably put more money towards those infrastructures, as well as helping passengers, as well as helping airports.
So perhaps for the next round, I'll pose the question. I don't think we have enough seconds left for an answer, but we have heard from smaller airlines that have tried to compete in regional markets that the challenge isn't necessarily the fees and charges. The challenge is the predatory pricing behavior of larger players that seem to intentionally work in certain ways to force competition out of the market. And so the question is, how do we address that effect? And is the Competition Act and the Competition Commissioner and the various options we have sufficient to combat what is seen as pretty anti-competitive behavior by some of the larger airlines? Thank you.
I probably won't have time to answer, right?
Mr. Bachrach. I ask all of our witnesses to hold your thoughts on that until Mr. Bachrach has the floor once again. In the meantime, I'll turn the floor over to Mr. Muse. The floor is yours. You have 4 minutes, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the witnesses here for the first time and those that are returning. I think Mr. Stout hit the nail on the head that the northern and remote airports and airlines are an essential lifeline from a social perspective, but also an economic opportunity perspective. We know there are many economic opportunities in the north and will be more so in the future. We've heard from all of you today and from the previous set of witnesses and from the previous study on competition, the high cost. And Mr. Morrison had some statistics with regard to the rapid rise in fees and costs. And it's kind of alarming and concerning that we have an international reputation as a high-cost jurisdiction. And so maybe aside from the costs, are there some unnecessary regulations or red tape that you could point to that the Minister of Transport, the Department of Transport could deal with today or in the very short term that would really at least help advance that competitiveness issue? And maybe we'll start, I guess, right to left here.
Thank you for the question. I think one I'll call out is the acceleration of recognition of foreign workers and their professional permits in other countries. And I'll use the example of mechanics. We see a lot of very qualified individuals who have experience on the type of aircraft we operate. They have equivalent licenses in their home domiciles. But when they come to Canada, they have to start over. And, these are people that we'd love to bring into Canada, welcome to your new home, and employ them at North Star. So I think if there's a way to, accelerate that process and have that recognition, that would alleviate some of the issues that we're talking about here.
And excuse me, I find it interesting, Mr. Hughes, that you have an Israeli pin on at the IATA conference I was just at. One of the airlines I talked to was El Al, who indicated that they have not returned back to Canada post-pandemic because they recognize that flying back to Canada is too costly a jurisdiction for them to do so. So they do not have a direct link anymore. But I actually just want to address the concern about fees charges. When we talk about, for example, allowing airports to retain the $400 million more that they currently pay to the federal government, that's not essentially profiting airlines. That's allowing airports to keep the money they have to invest in infrastructure. When we talk about the 29% increase in air navigation fees or the 33% in the air security charge, those are fees that are directly passed on to the passenger. So a reduction in those fees does not impact the profitability of an airline. Those are fees that go directly to, or that would be directly reduced to the passenger. So there is, I think, an element, and you heard this from the northern carriers last week, that those fees charges do have a direct impact on their ability to do business in terms of the affordability in particular.
Immigration policies these days is really hurting us in that we have members that have hired TAEs and have to return them back home because the terms under which they came here are now being revoked. So they've formed these people, they've trained them, they're perfectly well trained, but they have to go back home. There's a lot of logic, things that are logical. I mean, you fly a plane to Great Britain and you can have it serviced by somebody there, but that person can't come and service it here. So there's a lack of logic there somewhere that really needs to be addressed. And we understand why they're limiting immigration at some points, but they should make serious exceptions when an industry is in dire shortage of specialized workers.
Yes, I have 2 points to make on this. The first one is since we're using turboprops right now in the Arctic as opposed to jets, these planes fly less range and are much slower. So when you're looking at limiting the number of hours that pilots are able to fly per day, this is directly going to impact the whole region in a very big way. So, for instance, when someone was flying a jet plane, they were able to hit 3 stops in 1 day. Well, right now, if they are doing those 3 stops using turboprops, it's going to take them X amount of hours longer, and therefore they will not be able to hit all those stops in 1 day. They might hit 2, 1, and then following 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 the next day, they'll then hit the other one. What's happening is you have less flights being flown to the same routes all around. And so when you're facing a cargo and passenger deficit, followed by the number of flights available deficit on a daily, on a weekly, on a monthly basis, you're really crippling the entire region.
Thank you. Unfortunately, we're going to have to stop you there, Ms. Bento. I'm trying to be as even as I can with all members with their time. Mr. Yakino, I'll turn the floor over to you. You have 4 minutes. 4 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Monsieur Champagne, pouvez-vous nous fournir des informations?
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Chitan, could you give us some information about the labor challenges that aviation employers face, more specifically in the remote and northern regions? As well, the kinds of measures that could be put in place to improve working conditions and to retain qualified staff in those regions. Thank you for that very excellent question. Yes, there are many challenges of working in these remote and northern regions, and that is what we have seen with our various staff members working for different airlines in the north, Parapascal, Manitoba, etc., a number of companies. What we're told is that the working conditions there are more difficult than elsewhere. It's colder, the flights are shorter, people get on and leave, the routes are more difficult, everything is more difficult. So an important improvement of working conditions would be important, whether this be on a wage level or others would be welcome. However, it is not always easy to achieve these objectives. And these are certain objectives that our members put on a negotiating table. They're not always attainable, but these would be directions that we would like to head in. But as I mentioned earlier, the federal government can also play a role. I was speaking about non-worked hours. Legislative changes could be made more specifically to the labor code, and I know that's not within the purview of the committee, but they could ensure that all hours worked would be paid. And I'm trying to find words that is so that flight attendants' hours on work would be recognized. Thank you. So what kind of labor shortages have you seen? Is it mechanics? Is it everywhere? It's true for all of the sectors. The labor shortage is a key element. It's nothing new. I believe that a earlier panelist also spoke to it. It's very difficult to recruit because the working conditions are not easy. The hours aren't easy. It's difficult to achieve a life-work balance for a flight attendant who has to work during the day but has children at daycare. That's not easy. So you as a union representative, how do you think we can draft collective agreement that would meet with the unique needs of the workers working in remote and northern regions? I think we need to develop working conditions that enable us to ensure that these are positive and attractive. Right now, and let me, as I described, it's really a race to the lowest possible price with the aim of beating the competition to then dominate the market, make as much money as possible. It's not a race to offer the best services and the best working conditions possible. I think to demarketize the service offer in the air industry would contribute to improving working conditions in those regions. Thank you. Ms. Bento, what innovative technology approach could your company put in place to improve services in remote regions, and how can the government sustain that?
I'm working with a couple of cutting-edge technologies that I hope will be able to help us. Firstly, is in terms of a surface. So we are looking at whether or not aluminum surface runways have the track record necessary for us in Canada to feel comfortable to put this as a potential solution in the north. So we're working with the U.S. Department of Defense, as well as with Fontraque, a UK-based company that has been manufacturing aluminum panels for various different militaries worldwide, including NATO countries. We believe that this could be very well a solution for some of the larger airports and some of the most remote airports. Secondly, quickly, it's in terms of weather patterns. We're looking to see whether or not we can have the latest data available so that our pilots can make better decisions, take off and land. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bento. I just want to point out it's nothing personal. As I always seem to be having the red flag with you. Sorry about that. All right, 2 more 4-minute slots, and we'll begin with Monsieur Barcelou-Duval. À vous la parole. 4 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. You have 4 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to continue with Ms. Bento. I believe that in your opening remarks, you, as other witnesses, mentioned the issue of a lack of investment in infrastructure. And not so long ago, and I believe only last week, we had a representative from the Union of Municipalities of Quebec who indicated that the airport capital program has been there for 20 years and has been receiving the same amounts from year over year. So at a certain point, they were saying that we were able to build 1 airport per year and to upgrade rather the 1 airport per year with that amount, and that all of this was leading to a deterioration of infrastructure. I'd like to know if you're seeing the same thing.
Thank you very much for this question. In fact, this is the point that I did want to bring up. Upon further analysis of all the programs available in order to fund infrastructure development in airports, specifically in Canada, I found that the programs that we have on hand are not conducive to helping Arctic aviation infrastructure building. The airport's capital assistance program does have small amounts. These small amounts are for our community airports, but our communities in the north, we cannot look at them as community airports. We must look at them as vital, fully functional airports that are necessary, like a Pierre-Trudeau airport or like a Pearson airport. So they need a lot more capital investment in them than just a smaller regional airport functioning out of, Thunder Bay or out of, St. Hubert. Secondly, we also are looking at a permafrost situation. Climate change is affecting airports' infrastructures in a very drastic way. Asphalt, the typical building material that has been used to pave airports worldwide and as well in our north, is no longer a possibility when you go very, very far north. So the airport at Iqaluit, the airport at Whitehorse are paved using asphalt. But when we're looking at the airports such as Cambridge Bay, we're looking at airports such as Resolute Bay, and so on and so forth, the capital is just, the needs is much higher. If we look at aluminum, we're looking at a cost of about $90 million. So even though, and I've got the figures with me, so an asphalt runway will cost about $35 million to lay today. An aluminum runway will cost about $90 million. However, at year 20, they break even. At year 40, we're looking at an $80 million savings if you were to put an aluminum runway in the north versus asphalt. The key issue is not just in terms of the overall totality of the cost, it's also the yearly maintenance. If we lay asphalt, we need to maintain it on a yearly basis. If the cracking is worse as we go further north, then in that case, we need to have a robust infrastructure program in place that has the capital necessary, perhaps a partnership with the Canadian Infrastructure Bank and with other folks that have pockets of money for regional economic development and so on, so we can ensure that these airports are treated as vital pieces of infrastructure needed for the development of these regions and not just a community airport.
Il vous reste 1 minute, monsieur.
You have 1 minute left. Now, we were talking about the aluminum runways. That's the very first time I've ever heard about it. I'm intrigued by it. I'm impressed. I'd like to know if that is something that has been tested. Because it seems to me when you want to land, there's friction, and there's a certain amount of friction available on an asphalt. And it seems to me, for a non-expert in physics, it seems to me that aluminum would be quite smooth and slippery. Would that present a physical issue for planes having to land on asphalt
The U.S. military and
landing.
worldwide have been using this for the past 40 years. A large airplane, if you've gone to any air show, the U.S. Air Force and the Air Force use huge C-130Js on a regular basis to transport helicopters, fighter aircraft, tankers, and so on. These aircraft have been landing and taking off on these surfaces safely for decades now. They were used in Afghanistan, used in Iraq. I think our Boeings could very well land on them safely in the north. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bento. 3 times the charm, apparently. Can I ask a follow-up question on that before I turn it over to Mr. Bachrach? Because Mr. Barcelou-Duval brought up an interesting point. For us lay people here who are not familiar with the layout of aluminum runways, we're talking about runways that are not kind of just flat aluminum. They must have some form of grooves in there to provide. Can you perhaps explain what you're talking about? Because I think we all have an image here of this shiny, flat aluminum runway, which, as Mr. Barcelou pointed out, I would imagine is very slippery. So
I would love to thank you, Mr. Chair. So essentially, we're looking at panels of aluminum snapped together to form a uniform piece of aluminum surface that planes can land on. These individual panels are treated at the front, treated on top in order to provide the friction necessary for any aircraft able to land on it safely.
thank you for the clarification, Ms. Bento.
You're welcome.
I'll turn the floor over to you, Mr. Bachrach, as our final line of questioning. You have the floor, 4 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had the same curiosity, and Ms. Bento and I had a little sidebar conversation about these aluminum runways. It sounds like something that, over the long term, holds a lot of promise. This study is about affordability, particularly in rural and remote communities, and it feels like a bit of a tough issue to get a real handle on, because we're talking about private companies that are operating in our communities, providing a vital service for people. We're talking about airports that are often run by municipalities that struggle to maintain their operations using the current revenue model. And for the passengers, they feel like they're paying an exorbitant amount to fly in and out of rural communities. Now, we've heard the argument about fees and charges and the international comparisons, et cetera, but we're talking about a private market. And in some cases, there's very little competition, which is one of the key mechanisms that we rely on in a market-based economy to drive down prices. So we also don't have a line of sight on how the airline sets its prices. This is not transparent to passengers. And so passengers are getting on planes, they're paying exorbitant amounts, and then they're seeing that the company they're flying with is making billions of dollars of profit. So you can get rid of the fees and charges, but what's to prevent the company, in the absence of competition, from simply raising the price back up to what it used to be? This is the question, I think, for a lot of people. How do they know that the affordability, that the cost savings to airlines are being passed on to them in the price of the ticket when they see that, some of these companies are very profitable and they're making that money on the backs of customers in rural areas who are paying exorbitant ticket prices? How do we build that level of trust if the government were to consider the proposals that have been brought forward? How should passengers trust that the airlines are passing on those savings? And I'll ask Mr. Morrison and Mr. McKenna. I think they're probably best positioned to respond to that.
Very quickly, 2 points. Thank you for the question, sir. First of all, as you can imagine, as an international association, we can't discuss individual pricing strategies of our individual airlines, especially on a study with respect to competition. You can understand that there are concerns there. What I would say, first of all, though, just to the question of use the term profitability of airlines, as was, and I'm sounding like a broken record here with this conference in Dubai, but as we were reminded by our international counterparts, the profit margins that airlines face are incredibly thin. The analogy that has been used is on a per passenger basis, profitability is roughly that of a cup of coffee. So roughly $2 to $3 per passenger. So
Canada made $2 billion last year.
They also faced a loss in their last quarter, I believe. So, and let's not forget that, of course, airlines, as one of, if not the most hardest hit sectors during the pandemic, have taken on huge amounts of debt. And I believe you heard that from one of our members from Air Transat. So I would question the premise of your
Right.
The premise of your question would be.
I think, Mr. Morrison, it's a fair response, and I accept that. First of all, some companies are more profitable than others, and the airline sector as a whole has been through an incredibly challenging period coming out of the pandemic. But the question still stands because it's about transparency, and the fact that you have private companies, in some cases, publicly traded companies, but there's not a lot of transparency in terms of how pricing is set. And I don't see where the incentive lies to lower prices in the absence of competition. And the challenge that we're seeing in these regional and rural markets is that, first of all, the market isn't big enough to sustain two airlines. And secondly, when a little upstart local company comes on the scene, they face very seemingly predatory behavior from the bigger airlines. And we have story after story of being forced out of these smaller markets. So, maybe it's a rhetorical question because I'm not sure there's a clear answer, but there has to be a quid pro quo that if the Canadian public subsidizes the sector and helps these companies become more viable, more profitable, there has to be some assurance that those savings are passed on to customers in rural communities like the ones I represent. I bet the chair is telling me my time's up.
I see red. I see red.
Right. If he doesn't look at me, it doesn't exist. Mr. Morrison, I guess I'll turn it over to you for a response. Or was anybody in particular that I can give 15 seconds to, Mr. Backrack?
Sure, Mr. Morrison, since we seem to be engaged in this back and forth.
I'll repeat what has been said before, that nobody wants to see airlines fail. And when Lynx failed, nobody raised any sort of champagne glasses. As I said in my opening remarks, we want a competitive system. We want to see regional carriers such as Around This Tail succeed in a system in which all entrants have that same opportunity to succeed. So I would argue that absolutely we want to see greater competition, but in order to do that, we need a system in which it's encouraged and we don't set up airlines to fail if they're entering into a system that, as we've all talked about, has certain uncompetitive elements to it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Morrison, and thank you to all of our members for sharing your expertise and your testimony with us today, and above all, for your patience. With that, this meeting is adjourned.